Nice. So I was praying about what it is God He wants to share with us today, and I really felt that I should speak about trust. I think it's something that we all have experienced in one way and another, and often it's in maybe in the lack of trust that we have a half time trusting friends, family, or God. But sometimes it's also the good way of trust that we can trust somebody, and it brings us a peace. But a really key verse from the Bible on trust, we find it in Proverbs 3:5. Will come up. If you guys don't understand my English or I say some weird words, just like raise your hand or something, and I'll try to correct myself. Um, there we go. So this is from Proverbs, and it says that trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. That is pretty radical. I think all of us, we do the most of trusting through a daily basis is all based on ourselves. We trust our emotions, or we trust our own knowledge, or we trust our hearts. But if we should take the Bible in as in the most radical way possible, we shouldn't trust ourselves. We should only trust the Lord. And I think that is quite a challenge. I was asking God, okay, what does trust mean? Because it's a bit like it's a word we all use, but what does it mean? And trust is like it's a belief but put into action. So, for example, I can say that I believe that my wife's potato soup is really delicious, but if she then come and offers it to me and I say, "Oh no, I don't want to eat it," then my belief is not really put into trust. Like I didn't really trust it, and then we can even question in the beginning: did I even believe it, or was it just something that I said? So trust is not just it's not just a mindset, but it's actually an action. If we don't live it out, we don't really trust it. I was asking God, okay, what biblical character should I highlight to do with trust? And He highlighted Gideon for me. And for us who read the Bible a lot, we know Gideon. He was like fighting a battle in the Old Testament, and he was only having like 300 men. He had like a huge army, and God downsized the army to only 300. And then he went to war and he won the battle. And I was like, yeah, God, that's an awesome guy to talk about trust about. But I wanted to figure out what was before that. Like, what happened in Gideon's life before he came to that point of having this crazy amount of trust. So I started to read in Judges 6 and 7. And first I was like, I'm going to read it all for you guys. But I realized it's going to take like 10 minutes just for me to read it through. So I'm just going to run through it really quick because there's some really interesting key passage in it. So just to set the scenery, like we are in Israel here, and the Israelites, they did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord. That says in verse 1. And because of that, God allowed the enemy of Israel to overtake the country. So suddenly they're in this 7-year period where they're invaded by the enemies and they're like really down about it. They're still worshiping other gods, but they're crying out to the God of Israel still for Him to deliver. And then God is sending a prophet saying that I delivered you from Egypt. I gave you the food in the desert. Like He's just mentioning all the things that God did in the past. But then He's saying, even that I did all this for your ancestors, you guys still decided to worship Baal, like a god that is not God. So that was a reason that they were in this mess right now. But then Gideon comes into play. So God is sending an angel to this farmland where Gideon, he's like working. And this angel comes to Gideon and he addresses him and say, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior," or mighty man of valor, depending on the translation. And then Gideon is saying, because he just said, "The Lord is with you," and Gideon is like, if the Lord is really with us, like why are we then? Why is the enemy still all around us? Why are we in this trouble? So he's questioning the identity that God just spoke over him. And the angel is saying three things. So first he says that the Lord is with you. Then he says, go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you? Midian is the enemy that they're fighting against. And then he says, I'll be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive. So he's like saying his identity, he's saying the purpose of Gideon, what he should do. And then Gideon is like, in verse 17, he says, if now I find favor in the eyes, in your eyes, like God's eyes, give me a sign that is really you talking to me. Please do not go away until I come back and bring you an offering and set it before you. So even that God is speaking all this, and there's some angel here. We don't know if it's like crazy angel. Maybe the angel looked like a human being, and that's why Gideon has a hard time trusting him. But he's like, okay, if this is true, I want to test you, God. So he's go and prepare this offering for God. He comes back to the angel and he put it in front of him. And the angel, he takes his staff, put it to the food, and the food just like, flames comes out of the rock, and the whole food is just consumed right there. And then Gideon realized, oh, this is really God. Like, this is God saying this to me face to face. So the angel disappears, and Gideon is like, oh, I've been face to face with God. And then God's response to this this state that Gideon is in, he's saying, but the Lord said to him, peace, do not be afraid. You're not going to die. So after that, Gideon, he builds an altar. He builds an altar in this city, and the altar is still, it says in the Bible, it's still the day today. So it's still the day of the author writing this down. I don't know if it still exists, the day today. But it's just a sign that God really wants Gideon have learned something new. He can trust God, and he calls the altar God is peace. He learned the truth about God, which is that God is peace. And he's building an altar so that he will remember this truth about God, but also so that the generations to come will remember it. And I think that is really a key in our life, because often God reveals something to us. Maybe that he's a provider, maybe that he is love, maybe he's our hope. And we know it today. And then in a week ahead, we forget about it. And we're like, oh, I have no hope. Where are you, God? But Gideon knew the importance of remembering. So he is building a physical altar so that he will remember in the future, and so that his sons and his sons' sons will remember that God is peace. So that's pretty cool. Yes. Then later on, the enemies moves closer, and they start to take over even more of Israel. And Gideon is like full of the Spirit, and he's like blowing the trumpets, and he gathers together this huge army, 30,000 people. All together, they're ready to fight the enemies. And then Gideon, he got second thoughts. It says that Gideon says to God, if you will save Israel by my hands as you promised. So even though God just promised, I will save Israel, and it's going to be through you, Gideon. Gideon is like, ooh, is this really true? Can I trust you, God? And he puts up two tests for God. So he says that basically he puts up some woolen flea outside, and he says in the morning, if the flea is wet but everything else is dry, it's you, God. And he goes to bed, he wakes up, and that happens. Only the flea is wet and all the grass is dry. But then he's like, I'm not sure I really trust you, God. So he asked for the opposite. He says, hey, God, I will go to bed again, and then when I wake up, may all the grass be wet, but the woolen fleece be dry. And he goes to bed and he wakes up, and it happens. So God is showing twice that this is really what I want for you, Gideon. And then after that, it just seems like Gideon just trusts God, because God called him to downsize his army from 30,000 people to 300. And then he's left with 300 people, and now he's asked, okay, now you go to battle against the enemy. And this looks like an impossible fight. But at this point, Gideon is not questioning anymore. He's just like, yeah, let's do it. So they go there, and God, in a miraculous way, just win this fight for him. So I think that is pretty. It's just a crazy story to see this level of trust, but also see how it's built up. And I think what we can learn about God is that sometimes He's calling us to things that will seem way more, it will seem bigger than we think we're capable of. It might be something to do with our finances. It might be moving to another country. It might to do something with business, a relationship with somebody, something that we feel we cannot handle. But because God is seeing the real picture of us, He's seeing the greater picture of us, we can trust in that and go into it. But what I feel, what we can learn from Gideon here is also that even that we do not dare to believe it straight away, I feel God, He's waiting on Gideon to catch up with the level of truth that He's inviting him into. So when God says, for example, to me, when He said to me, go to Cyprus and work with this ministry, then there was an invitation for me to believe in His truth. And I had to spend a month or two really praying into this. I wasn't like, first day, yeah, I'm going to do it. I buy a flight ticket. But I have to take some time and prepare myself. And I feel, based on the story of Gideon, God is not angry at Gideon at any point. He is just letting him have this time to build up the trust is needed to carry out what He called him to do. And even I feel like Gideon is putting God to a test. And it says in the New Testament that we should not test the Lord, or in the Old Testament. But I have a feeling that God rather wants us to test Him or try Him out than to do nothing. Because maybe God is challenging you to, I don't know, give your car away to a friend and bike around the city. And we can be like, no, that's not us, that's not God. And then never test Him on it and just leave. But we can also be like, I don't really have the faith, but okay, let's try, or let's pray God, maybe ask for a sign, maybe a confirmation. And I really feel God rather want that. He'd rather want us to at least take some steps towards it and test it out. Is this really from God? Than just from the first place say, no, we can't do that. So really find that we have a freedom to do that based on the story from Gideon. Yeah, just 3 examples in my life where I needed to trust God. And one was this coming to Cyprus. 4 years ago, or 5 years ago, actually, God called me to move to Cyprus and work with a ministry called Set7, who make Christian television. And I was like, oh, that's exciting. Maybe not God. And I was going with it, and I felt, okay, this is what God has for me. And I have I'm a bit childish. I'm like, yeah, I believe in all of you, God. So I was like, I never doubted that the money will come in that I need, because different people are giving me money so I can stay here. And I never doubted that will happen. I was like, God is my provider, amen. But for some reason, I didn't dare to believe that I would have any friends here. I thought I'll come here and I'll just be alone. I'll just do God's will, and then I'll just live in a cave alone, not knowing anybody. But God really just blew my mind. I came here, and so quick, I just got friends, many of you in here, and just it was just released to me in an area of provision that I didn't even dare to believe that God wanted to provide in. Because for some reason, my image was that God didn't really care about my social life, but clearly He does. Another maybe a little bit silly example was that I was once at a worship night. It was a Sunday night, and the next day I had to fly out from Larnaca. And there was an offering taking place, and I had 10 euros or something like that. And I felt God says I should give it up. But I needed the money to take the bus the next day. So I was like, okay, God, I'm going to do it. So I gave the money up, and then I started to pray. God, how will you provide the money so I can go to the airport? And I was praying, not so much in trust, more in panic. I was praying in the night. I went to bed in the morning again, I was praying, praying, praying. I went to work and I was continued praying. And I started to make up things like how God would provide it. Like maybe I go to the bus and somebody will give me a ticket, or I'll find 10 euros, or maybe the bus ride is free. But then I was like, over after lunch, I was sharing with one of my colleagues. Like I had to be there in like around midnight in the evening. I was sharing with one of my colleagues. Yeah, I'm going to Larnaca tonight to catch the plane. And he was like, "Oh, I have to pick up my wife. She's coming in the airport at exactly the same time." And he was like, "Do you want to ride?" And I was like, "Yeah, I really want to ride." So I just felt that God really, he challenged me in something, and I might not have shown the full trust. Even that I took the step, my heart was still not totally in rest, but he really invited me into something. And now I learned that God is the provider, even in small things. Like when he challenges us, we can go on it. Yeah, and then just the last thing is in my dating with Stephanie. So in the bag is my wife, and we dated a couple of years before we got married. And in that time, we were like long distance. I was here, she was in England, and it was really hard because like I have a lot of emotions. So if Stephanie was like unreasonable or something was going on, I was like, oh, this is the worst thing in my life. And one day I just remember I wanted to quit. Based on my emotions, I really wanted to quit. And I felt that like I was praying to God, God, what do you think about this? Like, is this gonna last? What's going on? And God was just like, you have to stay in this. Like, trust me, you have to stay in this. And I was like, okay, I put my emotion aside and I just said, I want to trust you, God. And now we've been married for 1.5 years and it's really great. So it was just, I'm so thankful that I didn't give in to my emotions, but I actually trusted God in what he was calling me to do in this relationship. And that's what I feel. I feel like God is calling us, like this is like everyday examples. There's big examples about building a school in Africa, and there's like small example about like loving your children an hour late more, like really really spending time with some people who are dear to you. And there's many ways where we can walk in trust. And I feel like Jesus is like the ultimate example of trust. In John 5:19, he says, nice. I'll just read it here. This is the NIV, so it might be a little bit different, but it's pretty much the same. Very truly I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can do only what he sees the Father doing, because whatever the Father does, the Son also does. And I feel like Jesus was human. He was God, but he was also human. And because he was human, he had a free will. So when it says that he could do nothing but what the Father is doing, like I believe he could do something the Father wasn't doing, but he chose to align himself completely under the will of God, because he trusted him. He trusted that this is the best thing for me. So even like when he goes in Gethsemane the night before he's captured and killed on the cross, he's praying that God, if there's any other way, please let me go, but not my will, but your will be done. And I feel like that is the ultimate example of how we should trust God. Like, the circumstances might look really hard. Our emotions might go like this, up and down. But God's will is the best for us. And we might not see it, but he always invites us to trust in it. Yes. A thing that I have been contemplating on over the week is it really, the way God shows up is really depending on who we think he is. So like if our view of God is limited, then like our view on God will limit the trust we put in him. Yeah. So for example, if we have a little view on God that he is not, let's say he's not joy, then it's not because we don't trust him, we just don't think we can trust him in that area. So we will never like trust him in bringing the joy into us. For example, this is not God, this is a cup. But I have two cups here. I'll hold them both up, yeah? I know that both of those will contain water. If I pour water in them, they will both hold the water. So I can trust in that, and I will do it every day. I put water in them, everything is great. But if I don't know that there's a difference of those two, I will never realize that this cup is so much more than this cup. So if I don't know that I can put hot water in this, and I can put like tea and coffee and everything in this, and it will not melt, I will never see that happen. And I feel it's the same with God. If we just see God as somebody who saved us for heaven, we will never experience the joy on earth. The same, like, we'll never trust Him in it. But of course, the difference of God and this cup is that even that we have a limited view on His trust, He will reveal it to us. Like, this mug will never tell me that it can have hot water inside it. But God does. And God wants to challenge us all the time to renew our thinking about Him so that we will get the most out of Him. But on the same way, I feel if we have a wrong view of God, we can call it, let's say a wrong view of God, we can actually be hurt. So if I say that God is, He don't want any pain in my life at all, and I put my trust in that, then the day some pain will hit my life, I'll be like, God, why is the pain in my life? Why is this happening? But God never promised me that there'll be no pain. So suddenly I put my trust in an image of God. I added something to God that He actually didn't promise in the Bible. And suddenly the trust I put in Him, it's going to take away something from my relationship with Him. I'll start to doubt Him in other areas that I could have trusted in Him. So that's why it's really important that we daily seek God in the Bible, that we daily listen to Him and really figuring out who He is. Because when we know that we can put our trust in Him. And I really believe we all, sadly, but I think we all have too little of a view of God. He's so much bigger than we think. And I feel He's inviting us to explore that. Yes. And I feel sometimes trust, like if God, He is inviting me to, let's say, give away something, let's say go to Cyprus. He invited me to go to Cyprus, and I have to trust Him in this. I feel it's a burden. I feel like, oh God, I want to trust You, but it's so hard. I can do it. No, I cannot do it. And it's like, it feels so heavy. But I really believe that God wants us to trust in Him because it's going to set us free. Because as soon as we start to trust in something, we can actually relax in it. Like if we are in an airplane, if we whole time don't trust the airplane will fly where we're going, but we think next hour it's gonna crash now, we'll never be relaxed. But if we actually just trust the pilot, trust the people who build the airplane, we can relax the whole time. And the same thing with God. When He invites us into something, it's not to stress us out. It's not to give us a harder life, but it's actually because His will is best. So if we believe that His will is best, we can just relax back and be like, yeah, God, You just take it from here, and I will trust You in whatever way it's going to look. And it's not always that the way God invites us in is the most easy way. We might have troubles, we might have difficulties, we might have family issues. But I really believe that when God invites us to trust in Him, it's because it's the best thing for us. I would just finish off with saying that some of you might have trusted God in an area and didn't see it come through. You might have trusted Him with your family, or trusted Him with your finances, or with your business, and something didn't happen the way you thought it would happen. And if we don't let go of it, if we don't forgive God for it, it will build up some kind of distrust in us. It will build up a wall between the truth and our reality. So in a couple of seconds, we'll just have a minute of prayer. And in that time, I want to invite you to, if you have any of those hurts, if you have any of those things, give them back to God. And also be honest with Him. Be like, hey, God, I got hurt by this. but I trust you now. I want to trust you fully, even in this area where I felt you let me down. God is so much bigger. Like, we can be honest with Him. We don't have to be like happy and fake it the whole time, but really like be honest. I think He rejoices when we're honest. And for those of you who don't feel like you have a hurt right now, I want to invite you just to close your eyes and pray to Him and ask Him to reveal to you areas that He wished to see that you will trust Him in. There might be areas that you have never dared to trust Him in. There might be things that you never realized that you could trust God in. So yeah, I really want to invite you to just try to listen to Him. And if you don't have experience listening to God, it's very simple. You just close your eyes, you pray to Him, and then you're silent. And then I believe He starts slowly to speak to you. So yeah, I'll put on some music, I'll pray, and then we'll just be quiet for 2 minutes. Father God, we just come to you now. We want to experience the full character of you, and we want to experience a life in peace in you, because we want to trust you in all of your ways, God. God, I just pray right now that you will enlighten every single one of us with your truth, God. Show us where we can trust you. I pray that you will come and help us to break down those walls where we have built them up of distrust towards you in any area, God. Holy Spirit, come and deal with every single one in this room, God. Amen. Whatever God just spoke to you, capture it in your heart and ask Him again later tonight or tomorrow to just continue building up this relationship with Him full of trust in the full character of God.